Welcome to episode number 86, guys. I'm Andrew Coates. So you can hear my voice and differentiate it from Guido's. Say something.
Hey, I'm here.
Okay, cool. So we've got Paul Carter joining us today. He's one of the flagship T Nation writers, and we got a bunch of cool stuff to talk about. We love sneaking in political correctness in the fitness industry. We got into Brittany Dawn Fitness and her big scamming thing for social media influencers, and why Paul thinks that the consumers were ultimately to blame. We talk about supernormal stimulus like fake lips and asses and calorie-rich tasty food and why this stuff is a problem and it's fucking up our mental wiring. We talk about people being afraid to apply brutally hard training and nutrition and why they're not growing as much as they want. Thanks for tuning in. We love this one. Hope you enjoy it.
Shut up and sit down.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we've got Paul Carter joining us. Paul is an elite bodybuilding strength coach and one of T Nation's flagship writers. We've had quite a number of T Nation people on recently that may have something to do with the fact that I'm now writing for them, which is pretty cool. But we wanted to grab onto some of the guys that and girls that we haven't had on. So Paul fits that bill. So welcome, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Great.
We kind of gotten a conversation before, so we're like, we usually do this with our guests is we'll get them on, we'll say all this fun shit, and then we never record it. So essentially we have to stop that to do this, and we'll get back to it after.
Yeah, we got that.
It's going to be a pretty
up.
sick conversation.
But yeah, so let's get right into some good stuff. So, and this is something that's been coming up a lot lately. We're certainly living in a different social climate than we did 10, 15, 20 years ago and older. And the risk of offending someone seems ever present, especially in our world. So you tend to push back with your writing about training, nutrition, and relationships. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on political correctness in the fitness industry and where it is getting out of hand.
You know, I'm not sure as much like that we have the whole political correctness as far as the fitness industry goes. I think the one thing that I see on the daily is just that there is what I'd consider a lot of placating to people's emotions, and
Yes.
I think that's a big part of it. There's a lot of enabling by people within their social media circles where they just kind of give each other reach arounds on the daily about whatever it is that they believe, and that's kind of I think a normal human condition thing is that we tend to gravitate towards people who share our own belief systems, and I think a big part is not necessarily. It's not necessarily the political correctness within the fitness industry, but from more of a social standpoint. And that's what I think we see more as, I mean, you guys probably have the same way. You're like, well, I would like to write this, but I know if I write this, I'm going to offend a tremendous amount of people and piss a lot of people off. I don't really kind of have that filter for the most part. I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't write, I would say, that does fit within that particular paradigm. There's certain topics I just don't touch because it's kind of what we were talking about before we actually started recording. For the most part, we're not going to change people's minds. And most people, and you think about even yourself, for the most part, once you develop a certain set of principles or ideological beliefs that you live your life by, or whether it's training or your own relationships, or how you approach things professionally, we don't tend to change our minds until usually a couple of reasons is number one, until we either hit rock bottom or something cataclysmic happens that forces us to kind of reassess how we got into this shitstorm, and that we kind of have to make adjustments in order to kind of ascend out of that valley. The other thing is when somebody gives us, it's not challenging, and like I said, I said this before we started, was when you tend to push them onto somebody really hard a belief, and they have an antagonist belief to it, they tend to double down, or you tend to double down, right? Like somebody comes at you hard, rather than listening, we're thinking about what we're going to say, and then we just double down on our particular stance. So what happens is, and I read an article about this very topic a few weeks ago. It's about our value system. And we don't tend to change our value system until somebody can present us an alternative to it that actually makes sense to us. So one of them was about this black guy who actually went to KKK rallies. And he actually got a lot of guys to leave the KKK or leave white supremacist group because he didn't go there and protest. He actually made friends with them.
Yeah.
So when he gave them an alternative reality that would actually open up and broaden their mindset, that helped change their belief system. So one of the things I try to remember that the black guy getting KKK guys or white supremacists out of that particular, then that's a strong ideological mindset, right? Like that we have, like even in this social paradigm that we live in, is people create this deeply ingrained belief system that they have, and it's hard to move them from it. So when you attack them on it, when you feel attacked on something, the first thing, your first response usually is the basic human condition response is to defend yourself. But if somebody can actually sway you out of that by presenting you a different reality about what that means or context association, that's when we tend to move. So go ahead. You were going to say something.
Well,
I don't want you to
turn this. We can move this over into fitness ideologies, nutrition ideologies. Everything you're saying applies to that. You get someone.
Yeah, all of this stuff I've written a million times. Like there's so many parallels between lifting, life, nutrition, all this stuff. It has and that's all because we indoctrinate ourselves within a particular way of believing, and then we don't move very much from that. Like I said, until we get an alternative theory presented to us that actually makes sense and causes that paradigm shift in our life.
I think part of it too is a lot of these arguments tend to, like, if you don't like the person, they tend to get out of hand anyways, regardless of ideology. So, like, that's that.
No, that's true. Like, if there's somebody that you don't like that posts something funny, you're not going to tell them it's funny. You might laugh in quiet, but you don't actually, kind of give them a thumbs up on social media about it, because you might think that was funny. But that's true. Is that we tend to, if we don't like somebody personally, then we often tend to not like their ideas either. Not because maybe their idea doesn't make sense, but we're not open enough in order to accept that in as a potential possibility.
Yeah, or even like meld the models, because even if you think about the black guy at the KKK rally, like if he befriends them, it's going to be harder to have that, I guess, cognitive dissonance, because you see that your whole model just got blown up. You're like, I like this guy. Fuck.
That particular example, I think this is true. It actually came up in a book called The Holy Shit Moment. James Fell wrote it, and about shifts in your identity, and that's how people can actually go from being massively overweight to making major lifestyle changes. Actually just adopt a different identity and then align your behaviors within the identity. If your identity is someone who has friends who are of a different racial group, then it's now inconsistent with the identity of being a member of that, bad organization. So
yeah, and one of his comments about it, which I thought was really poignant, was a lot of the guys that he befriended had actually never known any black people in their life, or never had any real conversations with them. I'm not saying they didn't know them, but they'd never had a relationship. So when he developed that relationship, that caused the paradigm shift in their life that the same way caused a complete change in how they believed, how they thought, and they had association now. And that's a big thing. When we don't have association with something, or when we do develop association or context through experience, that's when we have the paradigm shift, whether it's about training or whether it's about life or relationships or nutrition or whatever. But oftentimes we have to experience something to actually understand it.
That makes me think too, there's another point I think is valid, is it humanizes people as well. I think in that example, it humanizes a group that were dehumanized in that example. And it's a good reminder when we're interacting with people who have different belief systems in fitness, that remember that don't dehumanize them in your mind. Keep them human. Remember, this is a person who...
I tell people this all the time. I was like, when they come, I get, if people want to come at me about something, I'm like, look, argue the subject. Don't attack me if you have a problem. I was like, debate the topic, but don't attack me as a person. And I mean, I still get it. And here's the thing. I've spent so many years studying psychology now, is that, like, for example, when I see a guy that refuses to actually just debate the topic and just calls me a dickhead or an idiot or whatever, I know that means that there's something I wrote that's actually bringing out a insecurity in him.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't necessarily take it personally, because I don't go around and troll anybody online or throw out barbs or whatever. I'm so far past that. And so when people are doing it, when it does happen to me, and it's pretty rare anymore. I used to be far more inflammatory and polarizing than I am now. I hope that I got a little bit wiser, and I definitely got more mellow as I aged. But when that happens, I generally do think like this, whatever it is, that's something I wrote in the past or something I said, brought out an insecurity in that person. When that happens to me, I've done enough personal development to go, that's rubbing up against something in me in a way that doesn't feel good. I need some introspection there about why that is.
Yeah.
And that's how you develop. That's actually how you become a little bit more of a complete person and a little more whole, is not taking it personally, which is one of the 4 agreements, is like, don't take anything personally. And when you stop taking things so personally and actually understand when something rubs up against you that doesn't feel very good, that's actually should cause you a moment for pause to say, why is it that's bothering me? What insecurity is that actually bringing out of you? So before you respond with, vitriol, you actually take a moment out to pause and say, what is it about that makes me feel that particular way?
Well, and generally in what we'll call disagreements or stuff that does happen in these types of posts is both sides aren't coming from that level of understanding of themselves. And that's usually when the problems occur. Because if everyone had that introspection, we would probably get a lot further on a lot of these topics. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got called out a few years ago by an article I wrote by Alan Aragon. And Alan asked me to come over and debate the topic. And I think it was like 6 hours that we debated this particular article, but it was super, super professional. And by the end of it, there was a lot of respect for one another. And I remember Dave Puccinello. I don't know if you guys know who Dave is. But Dave said, wow, he said, this is the most respectful debate I've ever seen on nutrition in my life. And it sucks that we don't have more of those. And that oftentimes, these discussions turn into proverbial catfights, especially a bunch of, amongst the men. And at the end of the day, I had to remind somebody the other day, I was like, stop debating, over, like, we're not curing cancer, man. We're just lifting weights and eating food. Okay. Let's kind of get this back into perspective a little bit too.
Well, actually, when I write these things, I sort of put them in order, but you just hit on something that actually is one of our later questions. So we might as well go right into it. And it was a post mentioning a phone call with Nick Tuminello, who's a friend and another Tunisian author. And let's see. And he was a recent guest on our show as well. So Nick talks about avoiding arguments on social media and valuing conversations with his peers, in particular private conversation, to have exactly the kind of discussion that you're having. So let's just jump into what you feel is the value of having those kind of relationships and conversations.
Well, there's a multitude, there's a myriad of things that I could go into there. I think just talking from a male perspective, and I deal with this a lot, and I write about this a lot, is that we're, and this might seem like it's off topic a little bit, but I'll try to tie it all back in. A lot of that pertains to what I consider, like, we have a lack of what I consider like tribal community amongst males anymore, kind of globally, right? So I wrote an article, I think it was about a year ago, maybe, talking about the overwhelming epidemic we have amongst depression in men. We don't do as good of a job as connecting with one another anymore on a friendship level, opening up to each other on an emotional level. I saw an article a while back that men are doing cuddle groups. I do not support or endorse or condone like cuddling with a bunch of dudes. That's just me. It's not for me. But I do think, like, for example, having those connected conversations, whether we're talking about our ideas that are related to like lifting weights or nutrition or just stuff that's going on in our lives, we've gotten social media has actually made us less social and more disconnected from one another in a very authentic way. So I've really tried to use those times, those conversations, to not just build rapport about our ideas related to lifting, but make sure that as I develop a friendship with somebody, even if we haven't met in person, because, we end up kind of knowing a lot of people through social media now, but don't actually end up developing relationships in real life like we used to before the internet came along. And I think that's actually hurt us in more ways than it's helped us in some regard. But as far as like those relationships, what they mean is they go along. It gives us opportunities to kind of develop a larger social footprint as males. So as we start to kind of trust each other in males, that happens, then we feel like we can be a little bit more open, and we can kind of circumvent those processes that we have that lead to depression, isolation, loneliness, and those kind of things. And I just don't think it's really talked about enough. I'm really thankful to some guys like Michael Phelps and Dwayne Johnson, that those guys are kind of bringing this stuff to light. I had a friend of mine who contacted me a couple of weeks ago, and a very good friend of his committed suicide really high level, was a high speed military operations guy, was later a firefighter, what we'd all consider like that, alpha male type, get it done kind of thing. But the fact was, emotionally, he was so restrictive, did not know how to articulate himself well as far as how he felt emotionally, did not know how to just say, man, I'm hurting, I'm weak right now. So how I'm tying all that back in together is, I think we as men, whether it's in the fitness industry or whatever, just the average guy, I think we need to do a better job of developing those relationships in our life, those friendships, those tribal communities that we have. So the fitness industry is, as we develop with one another, can be representative of that particular tribe, but developing deeper relationships, deeper communities with one another, so that we have those outlets. And because to me, like, saving a guy from killing himself is far more important than talking about proper leg drive on a bench press. So, but you can get to those places by connecting through these means.
Did you read the book The Mask of Masculinity by Lewis House?
No, haven't read it yet.
It became this super popular book maybe about a year and a half ago in the fitness industry. And whenever the fitness industry blows up about a particular book, usually I'm like, oh God. And it sounds like one of these, on the surface, it sounds like one of these cliches things about demonizing all masculine, toxic masculinity, as in like all men stuff. Not at all. It's actually a really good book. And it says a lot of the things that you just talked about. And Lewis is I believe he played in the NFL and he got hurt and he was just down and out and he's now a big podcaster. But it's actually a really, really cool book to explore a lot of the tough stuff you're talking about, in particular men and our inability to, the way we bottle up feelings and we're not really good at, and society sort of suppresses this stuff and tells us that it's not okay to be a certain.
Well, it's one or two. Like we're kind of living in a paradox right now as far as men goes, right? Because a lot of us were raised by fathers who were very emotionally restrictive and told us to man up, don't be a little bitch about everything that came along. And I don't want to downplay that. There are times when I think telling somebody to man up, for example, like I had somebody come to me who's really struggling with his marriage, and he just won't have the hard conversations with his wife that he needs to. And I said, dude, you need to man the fuck up and have those conversations with your wife to fix this. Okay. I don't have a problem, but it's really difficult for men to say to other men, look, dude, I'm lonely. Nobody wants to be that kid in the cafeteria at lunchtime that's eating by himself and say, hey, this doesn't feel very good. Right. Like that's considered like a sign of weakness. And that's how we end up kind of in emotional debt, so to speak, is that we're just not willing to look at another guy and say, dude, I'm lonely, I'm hurting, I'd love to have a friend to go out and like do stuff with. We miss that. Think about the times of years when you were a kid. What was better than getting up on like a Saturday, and finding your buddy and riding bicycles all day? You had that tribal connective thing that we have as men. And that's why I think you see a lot of that in football. Guys get out of football. It's like the guy you're talking about. You have that tribal community, and then you get out of football and you retire. You're not connected anymore. You're not going to quote unquote war. I don't want to overuse that, but you're not going to battle. You don't have a joint purpose in your community, right? And we lose a lot of that, even though we're connected with people through social media. And I mean, that's a total different topic. I think that's on there. We're talking about supernormal stimuluses.
That's exactly where this goes, though, in terms of like what I'm thinking, like, because everyone thinks that they have that connection via the internet.
You don't.
We had this talk. Why do we have video? And we have video so we can have a conversation and see things and have social cues. But like not having the video is a much different experience than having it. And that's the same thing with texting and social media. It's like everyone thinks they're connected to everything, but they're not. Like it's
different. Think about this, man. People like to brag about how they don't answer their phone.
Yeah.
Like you'll see these memes, like people are like my best friend Scott. Like Scott just calls. We don't text. We'll text, but we just call each other. Like we actually made a point to just call each other like normal freaking adult human beings. I don't understand why people brag anymore about being so emotionally and socially closed off. Like, why can't we just pick up a phone and call each other? And somehow, man, for decades, from the time the telephone was invented, people were okay with picking up a telephone and calling somebody's number. Like if you met a girl, back to that, I don't know how old you guys are, but if you met a girl when I was growing up, you didn't have cell phones. You had to get her name, you had to get her number, you had to call her house. Yeah. And then her dad would answer the phone and be like, who the fuck is this? And you were like, this is so-and-so. And I'm scared out of my mind just for the phone right now. But I'd like to talk to your daughter because she's really cute. And so the thing about that is what I think that developed in those times was that process of kind of overcoming all those insecurities that you had as a guy, right? Like even with like dating these days, guys, listen, I get on to guys about this all the time. I'm like, dating now is really weird because you have apps and you just swipe left or right. I've never been on a dating app. And then, or they get on social media, find a girl and stalk the shit out of her for weeks or months. But when we were growing up, if you saw a girl, you're like, I might never see this girl again, and she's really pretty. So you had to overcome that fear of rejection. You had to go up and talk to her, introduce yourself. You had to at least make yourself seem interesting to her. You had to ask for a number. So think about all those processes that help put a certain amount of character development in play. They've all been circumvented now. Now you just stalk a girl online, heart like some of her stuff, maybe drop into her DMs after a few weeks, and you tell her how hot she is, or whatever. I don't know what guys do with that shit. I just think it's the wrong way to go about it.
I grew up in the same generation as you, so I'm 41. Dee's a little younger. He's about
31.
Yeah, he's 31. But I didn't have my first cell phone until I had a cell phone in university. I was in early 20s. And it was one of those Nokia things, one of those big brick ones. You could throw that at someone, hit them in the head. It could fall off 2-story building.
I had a bag phone in my car.
Oh,
that was like
really?
one of my first ones I had. Like I had a bag phone in the car.
And,
I had that, but I was already married by that point.
and like I wouldn't even turn this thing on except to make calls, right? Because no one else had fucking cell phones. So
That's true.
now it's like just texting and all this stuff you're saying about not calling each other. I'm actually like a little screwed up and conditioned. I had 2 relationships in a row, really long ones. Or over long periods of time where you didn't call them, right? That's just not how they were wired or the circumstance. So therefore, just used to just text only. And in one case,
It's a great way to get into fights when you're not even trying to fight.
Yeah.
Just trying to resolve shit through text because there's no tone, there's no context.
Yep.
And you text something and somebody reads it in a completely different voice in their head than how it came out of yours. Like it's really terrible. The girl I dated a while back, we get into terrible texting fights because there's no way to really connect appropriately through it.
That's just a lead bite for shit. So let's go to, you mentioned supernormal stimulus. So let's go into this one. And you made a post recently about supernormal stimulus of likes. So, and like social media in modern life is just feeding us supernormal stimulus. And it's really messing with us. And this is stuff that are exaggerated things compared to found in nature. And fake lips and asses is a great example of this stuff. Calorie-rich, tasty food that was never found in nature in our grandparents, our great-grandparents and older generations. Certainly.
Hold your thought there. That one always hits me because that's why when the whole flexible dieting crew, or if it fits your macros guys, when they talk about how you're excluding food sources. I'm like, motherfuckers, this shit did not exist for thousands of years. Somehow people were able to survive through fruits, vegetables, like potatoes and like some meats. Like paleo really didn't miss the mark a whole lot when they first got created, right? It really wasn't that far off. You're just like, if you can't grow it or kill it, don't eat it. And there's like, oh, well, that's restrictive. I'm like, dude, because somebody tells you can't have Twinkies, that's not restrictive, okay? It's really not. There's a lot of food to eat out there, I swear to God. Swear to God, the grocery store is filled up with food besides Twinkies and donuts.
So,
I could even go on that. It's like paleo, just everything always goes down. I don't know. Maybe it's Ben House who said it was paleo. Every diet makes everything go down to cookies. Like paleo, you know what I mean? Like how the fuck?
It all comes back. Every diet goes, but how do cookies fit into this dietary paradigm for me?
Exactly.
For the most part, right?
They fucking made it happen. Like paleo is actually
it all gets bastardized over time. All of it gets bastardized over time. Like remember, paleo started off pretty good, right? Like it really was. It's just like you eat some sweet potatoes, you eat some fruit and vegetables, you eat some nuts, you eat some meat. I'm like, that's pretty good. Like that's kind of hard to beat, right? And then it became about let's make paleo cookies. I'm like, man. I don't even, and then flexible dieting was the same way. It started off that, hey, if you want to have a Pop-Tart, no big deal, just fit into your macros. Then it later became 400 calories from a donut is basically the same as 400 calories from like salmon and vegetables. I'm like, no, dude, you guys need to stop. You guys need to stop. You bastardize this to a degree that just doesn't make sense anymore. But go ahead. So we're talking about supernormal.
Yeah, well, actually, I'll add to that. It's the extremists who are always the loud ones who kind of screw this stuff up. And it shows up in religion, politics, in nutrition, training. And it's really not representative of most people. The fucking paleo cookie crowd are the extreme ones. The flexible dieters who are cobbling together as much shit as they possibly can. They're not the norm either. They're the nutcases. But they seem to represent anyone who is a different camp. they're the ones that they use to represent the bad guys to actually,
I had that very conversation with somebody. So this is what happens on both ends of the spectrum with that, is that both sides take the most extreme person from the other side and try to use that as the example for what they're preaching. I'm like, guys, you know what you're doing. It's kind of like when so when people who are anti-keto, they take the keto zealots who say stupid shit like, well, you eat fat to burn fat. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. And you guys know there's lots of smart keto people out there that don't preach that, but you're not taking what they're saying. Like, I'm friends with Dominic D'Agostino, who's probably the number one keto research guy in the world. He doesn't say shit like that. He presents the science, right. But they'll take these idiots who say stuff like, carbs make you fat. You eat fat to burn fat. And you can eat all the delicious fats and protein that you want, or don't eat a lot of protein, but just stuff yourself with lots of lard, and you can eat avocados all day long, and you'll just burn fat and get shredded. I'm like, okay, don't take that guy. Don't talk about that guy. You know that guy's full of shit. Like, we can't educate everybody, but what we can do is we can pick the guys that we know that are presenting truthful information and use them as the barometer, right? Like, that's what we should be doing. So then the same thing with the evidence-based community, they'll take the bros, who ascribe to, like some theory that we know is just not true. And then they'll say, okay, that's what all bros are like. Okay, we know that guy's an idiot, man. Like, we understand that. Don't use him. Can we all get closer back to center?
Like, no, your bro said that. And he's part of your crew.
Yeah, if you want to know, like, just go to bodybuilding.com forums and you'll find plenty of those guys. Like, we don't, but they need to be educated too. But the problem is we don't want to use those guys who are on the far ends of the spectrum as the beacon for, those ideologies, whether it's training or nutrition, right? That's kind of the key.
It's so much easier to win an argument that way, though. Like, that's kind of where this all ends up going.
That's creating straw man arguments.
But that is the argument. Like, that's why these things happen. Like, the keto, you gotta eat fat to burn fat. Like, that's, if I was, like, in an argument point, I wanted to win to the death, I'm bringing that guy out. Like, I'm gonna
exactly. You're like, I'm gonna crush this guy. I'm gonna look like the smartest man alive. Just let me get this guy that says you can eat 9,000 calories of avocados a day and still burn fat. And it's like, I'm gonna smash this guy with science. But here's the thing: they'll just cherry pick their studies on that side too. Yeah. And to show. So there you're just going back and forth, and everybody's left confused. We don't do a good job of kind of finding that middle ground where, like I said, where we're taking the guys who really are presenting good stuff and are kind of the beacons. I would consider like different guys in different areas. It's kind of even like with Alan that I mentioned earlier. Like, Alan was kind of the godfather of If It Fits Your Macros. He was the guy that started it. He even thinks now that it's gotten so stupid that he can't stand it.
Well, and the only people that I've seen, actually, it was a Joe Rogan podcast. Even though Joe Rogan, that podcast with D'Agostino and Lane Norton, that was actually one of the best, not even arguments, just discussions in general, because they didn't leave much off the table. And you have to sift through it as a end user to figure out what was good, but they talked about all the points.
And they took the two right guys, because like anyone who loosely follows Lane might characterize Lane as just this bombastic nutcase who is just anti-keto, but if you actually listen to him, he's not anti-keto.
He's actually not anti-keto
He's friends
at all.
He's very good friends with Dom.
Yeah, he's good friends with Dom.
They lifted together. They obviously are friends.
But now Lane does have a lot of fun taking the real worst examples and highlighting them, but he does intersperse it with scientific-based understanding of what keto is, where it works, and just tries to defeat the crazies.
Yeah, I'm not even keto, and I find myself having to defend the keto lifestyle more times than not because of the stuff that people on the other side of the paradigm say. They're like, "Oh my God, it's so unhealthy. You're going to die in 4 years from clogged arteries from it." I'm like, "Okay, dude, no, that's just not." Okay, that's not right either. Okay, that's not right either. You guys aren't right either. And people who do keto intelligently and effectively, they're just not pouring bacon grease down their throat every day as their main fuel source. Okay, that it's just not happening either. Okay, I'm not saying there's not some people that don't do that and take it far, but I'm saying the people who actually spend enough time learning that those particular diets like that, and are intelligent about that. It's kind of like we're talking about with Dom. I know a bunch of keto people because of that, but I end up having to defend people basically on both sides of it because, like I said, we have the zealots that are extreme on either end. I think we got off on this topic because we're talking about supernormal stimuluses and diets.
We'll go back to that, but it keeps opening up stuff. This is the way these podcasts go.
Yeah,
we've talked about this before here, but usually the people who tend to get in the ones to be wary of are the ones that identify with a nutritional ideology as a tribe. If it's in their Instagram profile,
Totally. I totally do.
I would probably walk a little carefully with that because it's such an important part of their identity. And when it's part of their identity, then when you challenge it, you're attacking who they are.
You're attacking who they are. I actually wrote that. Somebody asked me that question a while back, and that it was almost the exact response I gave. I said that the tribal thing we talked about earlier, it really is important to us as people. We want to feel like we have a belonging, something like that we build principles or ideologies around, right? So people do this with training. They do it with diets. They do it with all sorts of things in their life, right? So when you attack, or somebody becomes like a real big keto zealot and they really buy in, they create that strong, inner identity about it. Then when you challenge that, it's like you said, you're not actually challenging the principles of the diet. You're actually challenging their identity, and they become very defensive about that. So that's why people, if somebody does keto and it quote unquote works for them, whether or not that ends up becoming, like I said, they ascribe to becoming a part of that kind of keto tribe, keto group, because you meet other people, I eat keto. Well, I eat keto too. You know what that's like. So it's like, so that's how we actually connect with other human beings, through identity, right? Through identification. So if you do keto or you train in this particular manner, it's kind of like, guys used to, train West Side. You don't see this. I don't see this much anymore, but I'm removed from the powerlifting scene.
Yeah.
This is the way I used to, but like the whole thing was like, wear a West Side. So you train at West Side, and you don't even, or just use some West Side principles. Even if they don't make you a better lifter, for a lot of those guys, the part that made training feel better was just feeling like they were kind of part of something.
Yeah, they worked harder because Louis said to do this and blah, blah, blah. We're West Side, we're hardcore. And they just end up working harder. Because that's what they did.
Yeah, so the guys who use that. I remember, dude, years ago, so before raw powerlifting, so I used to compete in powerlifting for like a decade. Yeah. And I remember I was a member on this message board. Message boards used to be the shit. People nowadays, they don't get how valuable message boards were back in the day for learning, right? They were really a great.
Outlaws is Outlaws still going on? Or is that the one you're going to
I don't know if people learn through message boards anymore, but that used to be one of your primary ways for exchanging information. There was a lot of great information exchange on message boards back in the day. People realized. But I remember I was a member of this one forum, and I was just switching over from really training for just muscle mass into training for pure strength. And there were a lot of guys using West Side systems, and West Side's developed for gear lifting. Okay. And these guys were using like the exact protocols that they were using West Side for their raw stuff. And I was like, dude, how does any of that make any sense? Like, if you're a raw squatter, you shouldn't be living off a box. You need to develop your raw squat. That's how you're going to compete. And they would be doing, and a lot of the ideologies in West Side, I think, have been changed, and there's not as much dynamic work anymore. There's more repetition work. And stuff like that. But I kind of knew that then. I was like, well, why are you raw guys like training? And I remember people telling me, like, they would just repeat stuff without like thinking about it. They would say, like, well, when you're bench pressing, you need to use your lats to pull the bar down. I'm like, no, dude, I think gravity takes care of that shit. Like, it just comes right down. Yeah. As soon as I unrack the bar, like, I don't need to use my lats to pull the bar to me. It's right down, man. It just comes right to me. So that's kind of, that's the thing. I think people like to have, we've hit this a few times. People like to have a belonging, and that gives meaning. So without meaning to something that you're doing, it feels irrelevant. It feels empty. So in order to give meaning to something, if you like to have a belonging or community or whatever, it deepens that meaning. And that's why, for example, the keto people or whatever, these people get defensive, because you're attacking their identity, you're attacking their community, you're attacking their tribe. And that's kind of the difference.
This has been a good episode. We keep getting into good places, so I'll draw you back now where you kept trying to go. To actually the
supernormal stimulus, dude, we can crush that, because there's so much about that. You brought up the food, which was a good point. And the food part, a lot of people don't get. You talk about we've actually created, manufactured food that we know lights up the reward systems in the brain. Now, don't agree with these people who say shit like, well, it lights up all the reward systems the same as heroin does. Yeah, dude, of course. But so does riding a freaking roller coaster, because it's exciting, it feels good, and sets off our dopamine, okay? Yeah. So, like, that's another example where people take things like to the next step without kind of analyzing it. It absolutely is true that hyperpalatable foods light up the reward sensors in the brain. And the reason that is for survival. That's a part of evolution. So you take a highly calorically dense food, right? That represents survival to us. People don't think about this. So you put like a big plate of broccoli on one side and a big cheesecake on the other. Yeah, we want to eat the freaking cheesecake because it's got more calories and energy and survival. Okay. So that's really simple. This one's not hard. So they actually developed it. We know for a fact that the fat, salty, sweet combination in foods and the way that it's manufactured by these big companies absolutely is kind of addictive, right? Nobody eats one fucking donut. Nobody eats one tasty donut and goes, "No, man, I'm good." I don't know who that does that. Maybe a psychopath or a communist. I don't know. But the point is that if I buy donuts, I know I'm going to eat all of those donuts. I don't buy who goes into the donut shop and buys one donut? Has it ever happened?
I've done it before, but I actually have that kind of.
But you knew the playing field.
Yeah.
Like you
but
knew
I also rarely fucking eat donuts.
But it was a battle. It was a battle.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay, so what's your food then? What is it? What's the one food if you start eating it's going to be a fest?
I'll go buy apple pie, and we're talking those big fucking apple pies, and I will mentally sort of say I'll cut them in 4, so I eat it in 4 pieces, okay?
Right.
And I get one after a workout that day, or I'll get it in the evening. So I'll have one that evening, and I'll have one after my workout next day, and I'll have one the next evening, and then I'll have one for the following day's workout. So the pie lasts 2 days.
Yeah. See, you guys, I learned how to eat when I was really, really young, and anybody who's been around me, for the most part, has never seen anybody that can eat like I can. I know people I've been training one IFBB pro for years now, named Fred Smalls, and Fred said the only person he's ever seen that can out eat me was Kai Green, and he's been around some big eaters. Kai apparently can eat from another planet. I guess Kai ate $150 worth of food at IHOP one night by himself.
I think he recorded it too.
$150 of food at IHOP.
That's fucking terrifying. We were in Spokane this past weekend at a fitness event, and I think 2 of the nights after out for a social at midnight, we're out eating pancakes in this place. We actually went back the second time because it was so good the first time, and it was called a short stack. And there were these 2 big pancakes, so I didn't know what they looked like. So I ordered 2 of these, so 4 of them. And I actually only got through 3 because fucking pancakes are filling, especially if they're heavy with syrup. This shit is filling. And so the next night I just ordered 2. But, Jesus, how the fuck do you eat $150 worth of food at IHOP?
He told me Kai was the only guy he's ever seen that could out-eat me. The other big eater is Branch Warren. But when I get started eating, it's a fest. So I have to really be cognizant of what I'm picking, right? Because I know if I start eating something oh, well, there we go. Might as well just get on it now. Yeah. So getting back to the supernormal stimulus. So we talk about food. So that's one, right? That's supernormal. We talk about the likes. So we already know, we've seen multiple studies that show that likes give a little bit of a dopamine hit.
Oh, yeah.
So you guys, if you're honest, and we'll all be honest here and transparent, you think about what it is that you're going to post on social media, and if it gets 1 million likes and a ton of shares or whatever, that shit feels good. Let's just be real about it, right? Yeah. Okay? So there's an addictive property, and they've shown, through social media, that the way the algorithms are set up now is to want you to interact more on social media, to keep you engaged on it. So, that's a manipulation of your neurotransmitters right there, okay? So if you take somebody who needs that dopamine hit, because life kind of sucks at the time, they're going to be on social media more kind of getting that hit. The problem is then it cultivates that behavior pattern. Yeah. So now instead of going out and seeking out things to do in life, cultivating deeper friendships, with your guys, or working on your relationship with your girl, and that's something that I bring up a lot with a lot of the guys I work with. I'm like, why are you out, if you have a girl, why are you out liking pictures of half-naked girls every day? Why? Are you in a relationship with a woman that you claim to love and respect? So if you are, if you were out in public, would you walk up to another woman with your woman in tow and tell her how hot and sexy she is? Okay, if the answer to that is no, because you say you love and respect your woman, then why are you out consistently liking pictures of her half naked? Dude, I do not respond. Thirst traps is such a massive turnoff to me. I don't think Joe Rogan talked about this one time. He said, we got some girl out there that's got 8 million followers just showing pictures of her ass all day. He goes, we got to study this. Why is it such a phenomenon? And I agree. It's not that I don't see a woman that and my girlfriend's right here. So that's how transparent I think. And her and I had this conversation. She's Canadian, actually.
Where's she from?
So, babe?
Yeah.
There you go.
Where's she from?
There you go, right there.
Hey.
Say hi.
Hi.
So they're asking where you're from.
Oh, Thunder Bay, Ontario.
All right. We're in Edmonton. I'm originally from Newfoundland.
They're in Edmonton.
Oh, I lived in Edmonton.
She lived in Edmonton.
Yeah, St. Albert.
Really?
We're physically in St. Albert right now.
Yeah.
They're physically in St. Albert, right?
Oh, nice.
You're
Yeah,
originally
nice.
cool.
Cool. Small world, right?
So, yeah. Oh, telemarketers. Anyway, and her and I have had a lot of conversations about that because I always want her to feel like she's respected with how I behave or act or things I like on social media. So we had those open conversations. And if you're with a partner, it doesn't care that you're out liking a bunch of, pictures or whatever, but we all have natural insecurities. And whether people want to admit to them or not, because what happens is on social media, the first time you say like, oh, I don't want my girl out liking half naked pictures of dudes. Somebody's like, well, don't be so insecure. I'm like, no, that's between me and her. Or she tells me, she's like, if Joe comes to me and says like, I don't, it makes me feel disrespected if you comment a certain way or whatever. I don't argue. I just say, okay, babe, I won't do it. Like, that's really simple. I feel like that's so simple. Your partner comes and say, I would appreciate it if you didn't do this. I feel disrespected. When it happens, you go, okay, I love you. Like what I need to do to make it right. I promise it won't happen anymore. Wow, that seems like such an easy thing to say. And then people end up fighting about this shit. I'm like, if you claim that you love and respect your partner, then it shouldn't be a very difficult thing to actually show them that through your actions too, when they come to you and express this to them. But yeah, the supernatural stimulus, right? So it comes back to, for example, that's a big reason why. Why do you think that the booty training is so freaking out of hand with women now? Okay, let's be honest, dudes. Let's be honest. Women only want to train their asses to give them big asses for the most part. I'm not saying all women. I don't want to use blanket statements here, and I try to be cognizant of when I'm using absolutes. Why are you looking at me like that? I don't mean you. Anyway, so you ain't posting booty shots up. But the majority of those women like that, right? They think booty shots. That's what a lot of these women who built those massive followings just show pictures of their butt all day, right?
I don't even think it's about men. Like, I think it's because it's about fame at this point. Like,
I totally do too. But here's the thing, and I think that was one of the things you guys were going to ask me about. Okay. But I want to stay on the supernormal stimulus here thing for a minute too. And the other one's porn. Yeah. And I'm adamantly anti-porn. And I think we're living in a weird ass time when if you say you don't watch porn, other dudes look at you like you're weird. I'm like, what? I'm like, if you have a woman in your house and they're like, yeah, so you're off hiding away from her, jerking off in a sock somewhere in secret. Like, and you think I'm weird. Okay? No, I don't think so, dude. Like, and we know, here's the other things. Like, we had studies came out looking at the gray matter of the brain, certain parts of the brain gets rewired when you watch porn. Absolutely. It's a supernormal stimulus. So what happens is that, and you guys, I've gone through this with a lot of men. It's like, it starts and you're looking at porn and then it has to get, basically more hardcore over time. Because what happens is that stimulus is, you don't get stimulated. Okay. And so that rewires your brain. And I've worked with guys and done 90-day groups and stuff. You'd be shocked at how hard it is for some dudes just to go a couple of weeks without looking at porn.
And what's happening is the whole point of supernormal is the normal when it comes to food.
Right. It gets downregulated. So now, like when a guy's with his woman.
Yeah. So then these people have a very difficult time with relationships, interacting in normal relationships. They have a very difficult time with subsisting off of food that would probably be classically paleo or just the basic stuff that becomes very bland. And for lack of a better way of saying, these people actually become quite broken in a sense. And I think they don't even understand yet, although I think we're seeing it, the impact and the problems with social media. There is a lot of information to suggest iGen, the generation younger than millennials, their rates of depression, anxiety are higher, statistically much higher. And that's causing a lot of problems in our society for them and for everybody else for that matter. And they're the first generation to grow up with devices in hand and probably be on social media at a younger age. And we weren't wired for this stuff. We weren't.
No, dude, you're so. But that's one of the things to say. We're not wired for basically the environment we're living in now. We're not. Okay, we're not wired to be connected to thousands of people a day. We're not wired to be able to kind of stave off like this food selection we're talking about. These hyperpalatable foods that light up our brains the way they do. We're not wired for that. I watched we're wired to move. I don't get like watched the video as a TED talk the other night that my buddy sent me that talked about how the way that we're actually physiologically built to actually run. But people say, well, don't run, because it's bad for you. But just there's so many supernormal stimuluses that we deal with now. And what the problem is when you push back on that, which I do consistently, when you push back on that, everybody else thinks you're weird or you're odd or whatever, because they've become so accustomed to living in this particular lifestyle.
Well, and the lifestyle is hostile. Like in terms of what we're developed for, everything's essentially a threat. In terms of like you drive to the store, there's so many threats out there, and then highly palatable food. Like we weren't designed to have food that easy, or dopamine for that matter. Like dopamine's at our fingertips right now.
Dopamine used to be for getting a woman to procreate with and survival because you're out hunting food.
It's to push you to do stuff that's going to keep you alive. Now you can
exactly. Yeah, we're basically wired physiologically. When you look at our physiological wiring is to survive and procreate. Now we do have psychological needs that get met in there that need to be met in there to keep us healthy, but we're circumventing out getting those psychological needs because we get them through these supernormal stimuluses that don't actually create happiness. And you talk about the degree of depression and unhappiness and anxiety that we're dealing with now. One of the things that we know for a fact, scientifically, psychology-wise, is that the more options that we have, the more unhappy we become over time.
Which is insane. It just makes like
we have more options now than ever, right? Like the options are unlimited.
Well, and that's I think that's the main thing is that it's just understanding that is the cure. Because I think, well, not the cure, but just that idea of being awake to that there's all these threats. Like Facebook's essentially a threat. Like they're designed to basically get money from us through these likes. And if you get people to understand that, they can at least know, so they override it. They're probably going to choose not to. Like it's easier not to. But I think doing the hard thing is the best thing generally, and making that automatic, as opposed to just being an influx of stimulus and I don't know.
No, that you're absolutely right. So you talk about the influx of stimulus. That's actually where I was going to go next. So that's the other thing now is that we don't even know what to give a shit about anymore anyway, because we're hit with one tragedy one day, and 2 days later it's an afterthought because there's something else being pushed on us that we're supposed to be paying attention to. Like, what is it right now? What's the big tragedy right now? Notre Dame crisis. All everybody's talking about. I promise you, in 3 days, it'll be something else that everybody's talking about. And so what happens is we don't even know what to give a shit about anymore because every week there's a social problem that everybody's supposed to care the most about.
They raised $1 billion. The fucking Catholic Church does not need $1 billion fucking dollars.
Nobody actually knows how much the Catholic Church is worth, but it's been estimated, I believe. I was reading an article the other day. It's some astronomical amount. I want to say it's like 140 billion or something.
Are they like the biggest bank and they're like the second biggest real estate holding? Like they don't need your fucking online donations of $1 billion, but just because everyone should care about that. Like no one cares about that.
I've become cynical in that regard, in that anytime I see something like this, I actually wonder what the hell is actually really going on that's going to come out later during this time. In other words, why are we being distracted by something because there's something bigger going on, because it usually comes out like that later.
I'm watching the show called Blacklist, and my wife is joking about it, but she's like, yeah, I think everything's a conspiracy now. I'm like, you know what, I wouldn't even put it past.
Well, like, I'll turn this a little bit, because what we've seen is, in the wake of it, a bunch of people posting pictures of them in front of the Notre Dame Cathedral because it was personally meaningful. And then you get a bunch of people who are criticizing those people and kind of being shitheads about it. And I actually think that if it had personal meaning, if it meant something, you go see it and you're grateful you did, okay, cool. I got no problem with that. I think the people who are being the real fucking assholes are the ones who are shitting on those people. It's like, you know what? It's not about any of you fuckers. And then there's this big thing now with all these memes, again, shitting on the donations.
I was going to say,
or like, oh, we should be caring about donating money to water in Flint, Michigan. Those are not the same fucking thing. And just because someone...
the donations, from what I saw, the donations are coming from a few select, like, billionaires, really.
There was like 10 million from one dude. There's a lot.
Yeah, it was like Salma Hayek's husband, I think it is.
Yeah, he made pledge, like, was it 100K euros or whatever it was, for which I don't know the conversion rate on that shit. But either way, it's a lot of freaking money. But, I mean, my thing is, I have to ask this. I always ask, and I do a pretty good job of this now. What is the impact on my personal life and my happiness and my own growth and fulfillment each day? Zero there. It has zero effect on my life. If the cathedral gets burnt down or there's a bunch of donations, like I won't see any of that money. I don't have any plans to go to Paris. I don't, you know what I mean? So like it literally has zero personal effect on my life. So one of the things I really have gotten better at with this stuff is truly, when I say not caring, it's me. Well, if it doesn't have an impact on my life, the people I love, the people I care about, who I actually have emotional investments in, I tend to just let it go.
I think we should. I think this is actually good because we're just talking about shitting on things. Essentially, we do.
We're going to be hypocrites for this.
We're totally. You know what? You gotta have fun with this shit because, like, you know what? That affects my happiness because if you can't have fun. Okay, you wrote a post in response to the Brittany Dawn whole fucking thing where she's.
Oh yeah, we get into this. This is okay. So yeah, I do have some investment.
Yeah. You felt like social media and the customers were ultimately to blame, and I want you to explain this because, like, it does tie to this whole thing.
It totally does.
Like, your thoughts on the whole fucking shit show.
Okay, so why do I feel like that the majority is like the customer's fault?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this one to me is not hard to explain. If you were going to go off and buy a car next week and knew you were going to buy a car, would you spend any time researching the reliability of this car, what it should really cost, kind of like other reviews of the car, so forth and so on? Most people, like, they'll say, yeah, they just don't walk into a lot. Some people do it, of course. But most people, if they're going to make an investment in something, spend a little bit of time finding out if that's a wise investment. Okay. I have one of the few problems I do have is because I have a massive problem with the fitness industry kind of as a whole anymore because of these, what they call influencers. And these influencers get seen as educators by dipshits who go and they follow them. And most of these influencers, and I could start listing off people if you want me to, because John Meadows and I had this conversation a while back too. They put out zero content that's worth a shit. Like, does Bradley Martin really put out anything that you're going to learn anything from? I mean, I just don't like, people will say that's entertainment. That's great. But the problem is these people that build these huge followings through entertainment purposes often get seen as educators.
Yeah.
And there's a massive difference between being, say, an educator and being an influencer. But the problem is the influencers who have grown, they're the ones that usually have the biggest following because they put out content like this Jujumafu guy. Like, he's just like flipping around and all looks like stupid shit all over the fucking place. But he's got like, I don't know, like 1 million followers. Like, I don't get it, dude. I am not entertained by his monkey antics. So that kind of stuff to me, I'm like, I don't get. But here's the thing. He could go off and maybe he does know something about training or doesn't. I don't know. The point is, I don't get why these people get spearheaded to the front when we have so many really smart guys in the industry that can actually help people.
I want to see Dean Somerset like doing somersaults and shit. Like, well, he does the splits, but get this motherfucker with like 5 million followers and let him change the world.
And so here's the other part of that. So then sponsors see how many followers somebody has, and then when you go to an expo or whatever, they're the ones who boost. This Brittany Dawn at 500,000 followers. She was in Boost. She was with supplement companies. So the average person sees this and thinks, well, this person has to know what they're talking about. They have to know, like, they got to be, and they spend no time educating themselves when their whole social media is right there. You can go look and see what they're really about. And you don't have to be a genius to have some discernment about whether or not they're actually giving you something that's going to help you, or if this person is really just kind of living off of half naked pictures or making like stupid videos where it's like you're squatting X amount on a wobble board, or where you literally got like chicks hanging off the bar as you're doing incline presses. Like, I don't understand. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm old now, but I don't understand what's so entertaining about that shit. I watch Marvel movies for entertainment, I don't know. My idea of entertainment are people who are quote unquote entertainers. But the weird thing about the fitness industry is these other people who really are nothing more than, I would say, are just, I don't know, ass clowns.
They're clowns. Like
All right,
they are like not in a derogatory way. They're clowns. Like they're just doing whatever.
So I'll ask
No,
you.
I don't even mean that. Yeah, it's probably a better word. Like that would be they'd be offended. But I'm like, yeah, they're court jesters, right? Like they just make like shit, and they're like, well, we're just having a good time. I get it, but the problem with the fitness industry is they see this massive problem that gets built, and then they get put up on this pedestal, and I'm like, you guys aren't really like, you're not like the guy that wants to learn how to increase his bench press. That you're not the guy he needs to go to, like, or the guy that wants to actually learn how to diet to get in shape for his beach vacation. And the problem is these influencers all have some shit to sell. But they're not educators. They're often not very intelligent about a lot of the shit that you need to do to get better.
The guy that this one might piss a few people off. The guy I kind of single out for a lot of stuff is CT Fletcher, because CT's setting barbells on fire and doing all kinds of crazy dumb shit. But I think a lot of the bodybuilding industry really like and respect this guy. But I'm like, all right, this guy is a fitness entertainer, but I wouldn't take anything he has to say seriously.
He figured it out.
You know what's funny is I actually know CT, and like his online persona and offline it couldn't be more different.
He figured it out.
He's so soft spoken and nice and like friendly, like offline, and that's a big part. It's like I'm completely authentic. Who you get like right now in front of you, that's the way I write, that's the way I'm in person. Whatever. So it's like somebody's like, well, Paul's an asshole. I'm like, well, then you probably wouldn't like me in real life either if you don't like how I write. And that's okay, dude. I don't need everybody to like me. I got past that years ago. I don't need that affirmation. I need for my girl to love me and like how I treat her. I need for my kids to know I love them and for us to have a good relationship. And I need for people in my inner circle, I need to have good relationships there. But I don't need the whole world to like me. And a lot of that, and CT didn't even start off bad. I don't know if you guys remember the initial video that kind of launched him. Do you remember that, where he was just talking about when he had his heart attack and was eating McDonald's and stuff? It was actually really good. And then it transcended, like everything else, it got bastardized from there, where, it was like barbells on fire and stuff like that. There's a ton of people at the top that had just literally millions. It's so weird to me. Like, what's his name? Barack O'Hearn, who literally ended up getting famous because he put his hair up in a fucking man bun. Like, that's where we're at. That's how low rent we've become.
Well, and it's not their fault. Like, I think that their intent was to do that. Like, they figured it out. And I think that it's a weird world because other people put labels on them where they just wanted to get famous and make money and all that shit. Like, I'm for sure most of them would say that. But then because of their fame, now they're educators. I don't even know if any of them want to
We've got this guy, I think he's actually from here, who got famous because he does shirtless videos of him working out with his cat. Okay? Yeah. And he has got a massive following because he would do curls with his cat in his arms. He's got some tattoos. I think he's good looking. And just people eating that shit up like crazy. That's what it takes to get famous. You don't have to know anything about.
It all goes back to the point that we weren't designed for this world. You know what I mean? Like that wouldn't have been a possibility before.
Yeah, we created it. No, and that's exactly what. Going back to the Brittany Dawn stuff and what I was getting at with that, and why I blame the consumer is because they do zero due diligence, right, and then spend money, and then they act like they were swindled. I'm like, no, if you would have spent 15 minutes. Looking through and reading, and educating yourself. Educate yourself. Look, this is going to be about your health and wellness, and actually understand it's an investment. So spend more than just so stop following all these clowns and actually follow some people that do educational stuff.
We talked about dopamine, but dopamine is it tells your body. It's a predictor essentially on what you're going to do. And if everything that we do becomes easy and we get a dopamine hit for doing the easy thing is to do no research. We've almost been, unless you're awake, we've been conditioned to do the fucking most efficient thing ever. And that's to go on Instagram, find a workout, pay someone $20, order food to your door so you can do the workout at home based on these booty chicks, have the food come to you.
Dude, I saw that the other day for a meal company. They're like, and I don't remember how they framed it, but I just remember I had to scroll past it so fast. It was like, meal so inconvenient to meal prep. I'm like, oh yeah, dude, throwing some chicken breast in the crock pot, and cooking up a pot of rice. Yeah, that's so hard. That's so difficult.
I'm working on something about that stuff. Hopefully I'll have it out pretty soon and it'll be funny.
Is that what you're going off of? Oh,
yeah. Exactly.
And I don't meal prep companies, my point is like don't present it that way. Just at least say, is it convenient? More convenient to just say make an order and have somebody deliver? Absolutely, but don't say doing meal prep is hard. It's not hard.
No, and it ends up becoming the predictor on all the other shit. Because if one thing becomes easy, it's just a fucking domino effect. Then you're not going to work.
Yeah, my last article about NEAT was one of the ways you can get some extra NEAT in, non-exercise activity hormones is doing your meal prep, actually getting around in the kitchen and doing your meal prep. And then that's the other thing. So you use that time to cultivate, to learn how to cook better. So if you're a dude and you actually learn how to cook up some delicious, tasty food that meets certain macros, and you're a single guy, man, that's a good trait to develop when you start, for example, you start dating. What's going to blow a woman away more than bringing her over and actually cooking her a really delicious dinner that, potentially fits into her macros, let's say if she's fitness minded.
I was going to say two things that I want to do our next question. This whole conversation made me think of the meme. The best meme probably for this is the old, I can't remember his name, from Futurama, and it's the I don't want to live on this planet anymore meme. And the second thing I was going to say was a quick explanation.
Was it Bender?
Not Bender, it was the old... The scientist. I can't remember what his name is. I haven't seen it forever. But
Bender would have been good too.
About dopamine. Dopamine is not a happiness hormone, neurotransmitter. Dopamine is the anticipation of happiness.
It's an excitable neurotransmitter.
Yeah. So, and you can actually do, this is actually kind of cool to understand too, is when we fantasize and imagine and talk about the things we're going to do, we actually get hits of dopamine. So,
and we're actually less likely to do them.
Right. That's exactly where I was going. That's right. So it's important to understand that you want to accomplish something with your fitness, your lifestyle, improve it, whatever.
Shut up about it.
And go and do it. Exactly.
Go and do it. Yeah, you're exactly right. The worst thing we can do when we have goal settings or we want to see something come to fruition in our life is to tell everybody, because you're absolutely right, is that the imagination that it goes through your mind and telling somebody actually creates that feeling of it already happening, which means we're less likely to go out and do the work to actually create the manifestation of that in our life.
And Facebook will alter that by the likes. Like it already fucking happened. And like
already happened. Feel good about it. Feel good about it. Just post. I mean, you don't even need to lose the 20 pounds. Just make a status lost 20 pounds. But everybody give me some likes and some love.
Yeah, and then you got the anticipation hit, the excitement. Like you've been trained now. Everything you do, and like again, it's an over exaggeration, but like if it happens enough, that's why people end up where they're fucking at.
Now let's go into not fucking talking about it, but actually doing hard training.
Oh wait, we should talk about this before like we close up. Is that? And we kind of talked about this before, but you've written about people afraid to apply essentially brutally hard training and nutrition, so trying hard. Is this a symptom of a greater societal problem of being coddled? And kind of what's your answer to it, or the answer, or an answer?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I think a big part of it is that, wow, I don't know where to go to this. I do, but there's such a myriad of factors, I believe. Number one, I don't think most guys who are stuck or are making progress, I don't think they train very fucking hard.
Yeah.
And then they get pissed off about that because I'm pushing up against their delicate little sensibilities. But it kind of comes back to training really hard does not feel very good for the majority of people. It really doesn't. And I've had, I don't know how many guys over the years train with me, like at various times, and I'm not going to do the whole, like, I'm going to brag. Like, it's not about, like, I'm more badass than you. I'm saying they never cultivated that ability to train really balls the fuck out. And so I think that's why this whole overarching theme of volume is so appealing to so many weak-minded motherfuckers. And I'm just going to throw that one out there just like that. For the guys who cannot, and I'll tell you where I'm leading this, but I want to tie it in together really well. So for the guys that get pissed off about that, I hope that you do, and I hope that you actually go to the gym and start cultivating the ability to train really hard, because when you do, you're going to fucking grow. You're going to get stronger. You're going to grow. When you stop doing this whole thing of like, well, this one study says I'm supposed to do 20 sets. So what happens is when these guys believe that this thing about, well, volume is the primary driver for growth, it's bullshit. And like I said, my article is, I was going to talk about that. But they say, well, I've got to do 20 sets for legs. Dude, okay, so now you're going to downregulate your effort in order to meet this arbitrary number that you don't know necessarily works for growth. Because what we know works for making you grow is progressive overload and more tension over time. Okay, that's what's going to make you grow, not hitting this arbitrary number of sets in a training week. And all of the studies that we've looked at shows that. And I think another part is that, yeah, we live in a time, I think, where people create these built-in self-delimiters, because if anybody else, and this is another huge one, if somebody is bigger or stronger or leaner or whatever, fucking drugs, 100% of the time, it's always drugs. It's always drugs. So here's the thing. You take a guy that's never cultivated the ability to train really hard, or he doesn't train really hard, he doesn't know what training really hard is, then his body is going to only adapt to the degree of the stimulus that it has to adapt to. Okay, right? Your body's only going to adapt to the degree of the level of the stimulus it has to adapt to. So he doesn't grow very much because he's not training very hard. So he doesn't grow very much because the stimulus is not very, very difficult. So when he sees these guys that look so different than he looks, and they've grown this enormous amount of either muscle mass, or you don't even have to, man. When people are, saying that, what's his name? Hugh Jackman had to be on steroids when he was like 188 pounds, but he was shredded for his Wolverine role. That took him 20 years to do that. Like if you go back over the Wolverine series, like when he started off, he looked like he never lifted a weight in his life. By the time the end, like he was just in great shape. He was just really lean, right? Like he wasn't a huge guy. But you still have guys saying, well, I wonder what his G8 and test and trends. I'm like, dude, that is not what a dude on G8 test and trend looks like, I assure you. The point is, anything beyond what they're capable of can be accomplished naturally. When I was 18 years old, I've been training 4 years, and I was 215 pounds. When I started, when I was 14, I was 98 pounds. Okay? And by the time that I was, what would I have been? In my early 30s, I was between 252 and 258, totally natural after 20 years of training. Okay? Totally natural. I'd never taken a pro hormone, nothing. And I talked about this with my buddy Scott yesterday. And I said, when I was coming up to the years, when I looked at magazines, I didn't ask 72,000 questions about whether that routine would work. Because I didn't have anybody to ask. I just looked at something in the magazine and read it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go train like this. And I didn't care if those guys were juiced to the gills. I was like, I'm going to get that fucking big. That was my mentality. My mentality was, I'm going to get that fucking big. How much weight does that guy lift? He lifts how much weight for that many reps? I got to be able to do that. That was my mentality all those years. That was my mentality all those years. And so these guys now, if somebody's better than them, they just go steroids. So it's this built-in self-defeatism that these guys develop. So then they don't, why would you train hard if you don't believe that you can be any better, any bigger, any stronger or whatever without taking the juice?
Did Mike bring that up? I think Mike Israel brought that up on our podcast. He's like, how do you get shoulders like that? He's like, motherfucker, do lateral raises with 45s. Like, well, like I do them. And like, you can't do that. When you can, your shoulder will probably look like my fucking shoulder. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my point. It's like, well, dude, you're squatting 225 and you're doing it for like sets of 10, okay? I'm like, okay, so I actually have a client, a pretty famous client out of New York, and he's like bitching. It took me, I've been working with him for 2 years. It took the better part of a year and a half before he got it. Like, dude, you are not, like, send me your training log. I'm like, you are not training hard enough. You're not moving any more weight. I'm like, why is this so hard for me to get through your head? And I told him, I was like, what are you squatting? So like he would be like, it was like a 115. I'm like, dude, they're like children that out squat you. I'm like, if you want your legs to be bigger, I'm like, let me ask you a question. I was like, if you could squat 3 plates on each side for a set of 20 easy, would your legs be big? He's like, yeah, they'd be huge. I go, okay, do that. Just do that. Just focus on that. Focus on that.
I've got a client, I just posted a video of her yesterday. She's like late 30s. She's 5'1" if she's lucky, probably about 130 pounds. She's got 175 pounds on the bar for a heavy single. This woman can handle weight. And then one of our buddies, my buddy Jordan, actually kind of looks like you. He's got the beard, he's shaved head, big jacked up dude. And I think Jordan went and pulled off 315 squat for 29 reps one day on a challenge. And this guy has got some massive quads. He is a thick
Wow, imagine
guy.
that.
Imagine that, right?
He can squat 315 for like 30 reps and he's got massive quads. That's so weird. I don't know how that would happen.
No, it's mind blowing, right?
Well, and we kind of got into this even before, and I won't ruin all the stuff you're going to post up on your article, but that idea of, we talk about strength and volume, but it's almost an excuse for weak people to say, like, to not train as hard to get something that they want to attain, and it just doesn't really correlate like that. And like you looked up all the studies, but
well, I'll tell you why that's appealing to a lot of people. Because math is kind of tangible.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I do X number of sets for X number of reps, that should equal X amount of growth. But we all know it doesn't work that way. But the truth is like if I do know for a fact if I need to grow and I'm say squatting like we're talking about, if I'm squatting 275 for a set of 10 now, but I can get to say 405 for a set of 10, I'm going to be bigger.
Yeah, you'd have to.
I'm going to be bigger, right?
Like why don't they use that logic? Like, and I guess maybe you know what it's. Well, you probably pulled more studies, but I just don't know if that study happens because it'll take a while.
Well, we see that in studies. The Barbalo study was one of the ones actually Brett Contreras referenced it recently too. And it said you saw the same thing. It was a 5-set group, a 10-set group, a 15-set group, and a 20-set group. The 5 and 10-set groups killed the 15 and 20-set group. And the growth, when you look at the hypertrophy where they did the muscle thickness measurement, basically you see the same kind of parallel relationship with the strength gains. So the group that had the highest strength gains in certain movements saw the greatest amount of growth in those muscle groups. This is not hard to figure out, guys. I don't know why people want to make this so complicated.
What's your thoughts on, like, I was going to just jump in. What's your thoughts on rep speed? Because Ben House is basically doing an in-house study where they're essentially going for volume, but volume with low rep speed, which would just be an indicator of strength. Because if you're strong enough to lift slowly, you have to be somewhat strong because you can't do light reps till your fucking 50th rep and it be slow. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah. Well, here's the thing about that is when you use when you use a slower rep speed, especially with concentric, you're gonna activate the low threshold motor units, right? Like those are not as responsible for growth.
I was thinking in terms of like you get to like, let's say you do a set of 10 and by your last 3 are slow just from the sheer fact it has to be slow because it's heavy. Does that make sense? Not controlled slow speed, but like your reps get slow. You're fucking going hard.
Okay, so a good conversation there is what I talk to guys a lot about is that's what I call setting appropriate failure points within specific movements. Okay. So like when I talk about training to failure, and I do believe training to failure is basically kind of a requirement at some point in order to grow, right? But it depends on movement selection. So for example, squats and deadlifts, I don't advise guys. I advise you setting an appropriate failure point that you consider training to failure. And here's the reason why is because you take a movement like a squat or deadlift, there's a high degree of neurological output associated with that movement that's going to tax you very systemically if you're going like to failure. And the truth is the return on the stimulus probably is not going to be very different. Whereas if you leave a couple of reps in the tank, but if you really go to failure, like true failure, where you're not getting out of the rack, which is really rare, but if you were to train that way, the amount of systemic fatigue that's going to occur neurally is going to be very dramatic. So it's going to tax you very, very heavily systemically, which is going to be hard to recover from, right? Whereas you're going to get probably the same amount of growth if you leave a couple reps in the tank, but you hit those last 2 reps and you're kind of grindy. You know what I'm talking about? You're like, yeah, that one's pretty grindy, and you rack it. And a lot of times people will watch like a video of me. They don't understand. Like internally, I know when I'm close to failure. I know when I've hit my failure point, but it might not look like it on a video. But I know if I did 2 more, I would really tap into my recovery for the week.
And you hear that comment all the time. Oh, you look like you had 2 more.
I had 2 more.
I'll add this to what you're saying because I know you're going here with this. In squats, take them to failure. There's risks certainly. Deadlifts, your form for most people is going to start breaking down. That's going to start looking really bad. You're increasing the likelihood of getting hurt, which then completely sets you back and interferes your ability to train hard. So you got to.
There's also the theory, like especially I don't really deadlift anymore. I do Romanians or I do rack pulls, and I have my reasonings for that. But the deadlifts themselves, I think deadlifting, boy, this gets on people's nerves. I think deadlift is probably the most overrated movement on a myriad of levels. And I love that it pisses people off. But when I actually sit down and explain it to them, like it comes down to them doubling down on that. Really, because I'm like, dude, if you just love deadlifting, that's cool. But one of the things is deadlifts, to me, I've consistently found is the most neurological taxing movement that you can do. And one of the reasons why powerlifters, for the most part, a lot of them, once they actually have really good deadlifts, they don't deadlift very often. Once you actually learn the movement and you've built in that ability so the motor units are firing, so your body knows them really well. It's really kind of about sparing yourself with the deadlift and letting it come to you and moving it with appropriate speeds. And I didn't start pulling over 700 consistently until I stopped pushing those heavy and trying to pull heavy all the times. And like you said something before that I didn't know where to go from there because I get off on deadlift tangents because like I ended up fighting the whole internet on that because most of the internet, especially the noobs and intermediates, think squats and deadlifts fix every fucking problem in the world. And I'm not saying they don't fix some, but they're not the answer to everything.
And what people are arguing about that haven't lifted over 700. Like, if you've lifted over even 600, like, you'll have a different opinion of it than your fucking 225.
That's very true. That's absolutely very true. But coming back to what were you talking about before that? Because we were going somewhere with it. You were hitting on something. I got off on my deadlift tangent.
Well, yeah. Oh, I know the one thing I was going to say too is like we were talking about taking things to failure and you were talking about the fatigue that you accumulate. Certainly with deadlifts, your form starts to break down. If you're going to go push to true failure and even past it, shit like drop setting, do shit on a T-bar row machine. Don't do a barbell rows. Do fucking, a chest press machine. Don't necessarily do that with a bar with collars on it with no spotter, right? You got to use common sense with this stuff and not get hurt. I don't know where else we were going with that. So
that's really good. That's why I tell guys a huge part of like what I teach is setting appropriate failure points. So like for example, even with like a leg press, you go into true failure on a leg press. I think is kind of okay. Like there's not a huge problem there as long as you got the safety pins out because the neurological output on a leg press is not huge. It's really not. Like now here's the great thing about the muscular output on it is, right? Like you can destroy your quads, your hams, and your glutes even with it, depending on how you're performing the movement. But because you're seated, as soon as you stand up, your nervous system is way more activated than say when you're seated or lying down or whatever. That should make sense. It's kind of like the difference between say doing a squat and a glute thrust. Even if you're doing a glute thrust with like 700 pounds, the amount of intramuscular coordination involved in it is very low. You're doing a hip extension for the most part. But if you're doing a squat, you're literally standing on your feet and there's a ton of intramuscular coordination that has to happen to execute it effectively. Whereas we have a low neuromuscular output movement like a hip thrust or even a leg press. Think about it. You can take any noob into the gym day one and actually teach them how to do, say, a hip thrust pretty effectively, like right out of the gate. You can teach them to get on the leg press. Don't lower it down so far that you get rounding in your lumbar spine, whatever. And I consider those low neurological movements. And so with those, we have low neurological movements that actually have high degrees of muscular output. Yeah, you take those bad boys to failure because that's where you're going to see a lot of growth. But you have a movement like a deadlift or a squat. Even for example, like I don't think overhead press would be as much, but outside of deadlifting and squats, I can't really think of a ton of movements that you can take to failure safely.
Cool. Well, we've kept you a long time, so let's do a couple of quick wrap-up questions we always ask. And we like to get book recommendations from our guests to see what they're reading, if they've got anything that they think everybody else should read. And it can be about anything. It doesn't have to be training. So
he just wants a book.
Yeah.
It's actually selfish. He just wants another book to read.
I'm getting low on the queue, so.
He reads
The Way of the Superior Man is a really great book. I think all guys should read. Does a really great job of covering a myriad of topics I think a lot of guys struggle with. I would like to write a similar book to it in the future. I can find time. Traveling Light is another good book. It's about understanding how to let go of things we tend to encumber ourselves with that make life more difficult. I always recommend Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. Whether or not, and what's cool about that book is that even though it's a spiritual Christian-based book, I know so many guys that don't even consider themselves to be, quote unquote religious or whatever, but love that book. It's a really great book for men.
I think that's a you might have. I think you have listed 3 books Andrew hasn't read. Yeah, it's kind of an inside joke, but the dude reads like a book a week. It's fucking nuts.
That's awesome.
I know. Actually, it's way more than that.
Yeah.
I just audiobooks. I just blast audiobooks on 2x speed, and they're really
Dude, that's such a great. When I get that question out of people, I think, okay, these are the people that actually think. When I was single, that was the question I used with women. Was in order to eliminate them from my potential dating pool, what I would ask them, "What's the last really good book you read?" And if there was even a pause at that point, I'm like, "All right, she's marked off." And some people, women get mad about that. She's like, a woman could say that about a guy, we don't get upset. We're like, oh, maybe I should read more books. But if a guy says that, about a woman, well, you're sexist. I'm like, no, it's like a woman's not reading anything at all. Then she's probably not cultivating, and especially apply that to the fitness industry.
Oh yeah.
Because you go to Expo, there's going to be a lot of guys get really. It's just so weird, man. They get so enamored by those women that they consider to be so hot, and I'm like, and I'm not. I don't want to stereotype a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of those women haven't. They've gotten by so far on how they look. They don't cultivate those other parts of their lives that kind of, set them up to actually have really good relationships. But most of the time, though, it's going to be the really shallow guys that are going to be
on the same
hooking
level,
up.
man. Like it'll.
Yeah, so it's I generally I had when I actually started to start dating again. I actually interviewed women, interview processes. So,
As your girl,
the audience can't see. He looks right over at his girl. So,
what book did she read? What was her book? Did she pass? She obviously passed.
She told me. I don't remember. That was like 6 months ago, and I actually don't. I just remember she did tell me what it was. At that time, I was like, she answered the question, or she wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
But the other thing actually I like was she wasn't involved in the industry. That was kind of a rule I made to myself because I didn't want to really date anybody that was involved in the industry. And I dated a couple of women with massive followings in the industry, and I was like, nah, I don't think that's for me.
Have you read The Coddling of the American Mind? It's a bit newer.
No, in fact, what's even funny is I haven't even got. I'm going to get persecuted for this. I haven't got around to finishing 12 Rules for Life yet. And I need to just finish that.
Even if you've read it,
it's pretty good. I mean, I think it's just a lot of common sense stuff. Of course, on social media, you get our quarter of the industry where some people like it, and then some people will freak the fuck out when you mention Jordan Peterson as if he is the goddamn devil. And
what are you talking about? I love Jordan Peterson.
He's great. I know.
It's a good rating.
Again, the problem with Jordan is you get the people who subscribe to him like he's the Messiah. And of course, he does draw in some of the real hardcores on one end of the ideological spectrum. But
now we're going to start dealing with the zealots again on both sides of the spectrum.
Same shit. But then the zealots on the other side are freaking out about him and think that he represents everything that's wrong with people. You know what? It's just one more person. If you can't handle, this is actually what Coddling the American Mind is about. Is when people can't handle different viewpoints, and then they want safe spaces from that, and they want to silence speakers of different ideological backgrounds, usually political, but just different belief systems. And they run to administrators to shut this stuff down. And when that doesn't work, they protest and freak the fuck out. So a lot of this stuff, it's actually a very liberal-minded book, but it goes into a lot of the stuff that's happening in iGen on college campuses in the U.S. and where this came from. And it does talk about social media. It talks about depression, anxiety, the rise of the culture of safetyism and things like concept creep, where if you don't agree with someone, you're a racist or a phobic, whatever. And that doesn't solve any of these problems or open up discussion. So super book, I'm recommending it to pretty much everybody if you care about this sort of shit. So
yeah, what was the name of it again? I'm going to write it down right now.
Coddling of the American Mind.
What is it? I can barely hear it.
Sorry, The Coddling of the American Mind.
Okay. Well, that sounds like I would like that.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, I think you would actually really appreciate it. It's a pretty well-written book. It's not this shock schlock stuff that we're starting to see more of. Like, I love shitting on, what's that stupid book? The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Right? Like, I love shitting on that book. That's the twilight of our self-help.
You love shitting on that book?
Love shitting on that book.
It's awesome because everyone loves the book and all
figuratively.
Like I want to say half our guests will bring that book up, and I laugh every time because he fucking hates it.
Well, notice it wasn't in any of my books.
No.
First off, I think that, and I like some of Mark's work. I think some of his work's good, but I think we have way too much of that particular fucking ideology going on now. That's people adopted like that as their their personal paradigm for life was, I don't give a fuck. I'm like, that is like, okay, you know what you're going to end up surrounded by? A lot of people who don't give a fuck, and that means they're not going to give a fuck about you either. And I think Mark does some good work, but I never bought that book. I actually sat in I was in a Barnes and Nobles. I was looking as I was book shopping one day, and I went through it. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's stuff that I agree with him on. There's stuff that I disagree with him on. But I think, and I actually saw he was putting out another one, and of course, like it's almost like he's kind of riding the coattails because the name of it is. What's the name of it? It's called something, a book about everything is fucked, a book about hope. And I'm like, okay, dude, we got it. Like your last book was a New York Times bestseller, and it's called, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And now the next one is called Everything is Fucked. I'm like, find some originality now. I'm literally turned off by the title, from the simple fact that I tie in with the previous one, but. Yeah, I would never put that on my book of a list of must-read books. I'm not sure what I would get out of. Some people say, well, the book is about. I've heard people say, the book isn't about not giving a fuck. So then I don't know, title it different. I think that's a potential problem that we have overall these days. Is that most people, like how many times do you see people bragging about that, like. 0 fucks to give. I don't give a fuck. Like I'm like, okay, great. So intellectually, you're lazy, and emotionally, you don't care. It's like
you and Andrew.
It's a great life that you're gonna lead.
Perfect. See, this is awesome. All right.
See, you confirmed his bias. This is like the best thing ever. You're the first person that literally took the words out of his mouth. The whole fucking book. It's great.
I think if anyone listens to this podcast, they'll hear a lot of similarities the way that Paul and I think. So
I would agree. Okay, we always end this, like obviously like the personal plugs, but where can our listeners find you on social media, online, like your writing? Like what's the best place to find stuff from Paul Carter?
Probably Grindr. I just wanted to say I thought it was a good joke. I mean, as far as I know, like I don't write the blog much anymore. So for years, that's how I got started. Was lift-run-bang.com. I don't direct people there really anymore because I don't put up really content because I'm so busy writing for other publications now. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. It's really I just don't find time between dealing with clients, writing articles for publications, which at this point in my life, I actually find a little more fulfilling than just writing for myself. And I do find that having to write for publications, anything that's going to be published, kind of keeps me on my toes a little more than just kind of ranting on my blog. And I don't really have a lot to rant about anymore. Like I said, I kind of went through I actually grew up a few years ago and tried to mature a little bit. So I don't really have a lot to rant about anymore. But if somebody just does a search for Lift, Run, Bang, they'll pretty much find me anywhere. So they can find me there on Instagram. They'll find me on Facebook. You'll even find me on Twitter, but I just use Twitter as kind of a part of my Instagram. Personally, we didn't discuss. I kind of hate social media in a lot of different ways. There's good and bad to it. I try to use it more for educational business. Anything that I'm doing now, it's not really as much of a mixture. Like Facebook's kind of more of my personal stuff because that's where I will go on and talk about movies or just music or whatever. So I try to kind of literally keep that for my own like personal stuff. But Instagram, I try to use a little bit more for educational stuff. But I don't even like have like I've never even delved out to get myself a real website, dude. I think I'm the only guy in the whole industry that's never done that.
Took me a long time. Finally did it. Got me writing, and that led to the T-Nation gig.
I just don't even know what I would put on
it. That's
I don't even know what to put on it. I actually do. Like, I have a whole vision for my future, for real. Like, I have a very strong vision, and a big part of it is like delving into these topics for men and helping to get men, kind of into a more meaningful direction in their lives and how to cultivate that, how to get over a lot of dysfunctional habits that a lot of us have.
You got to do that because otherwise you're just thinking it and you get that dopamine hit. It already happened.
Yes.
No, like this has been something I actually am putting the work in towards, and actually have a tremendous amount of work going into. And actually, that's funny is like I actually stopped talking about it for a while for that very reason. Is I wanted to get things going, and it kind of got circumvented because I've had some stuff come up in life like it always going to do. Even like my mom passed away a month ago, so it's like every few months or whatever, life tends to throw you a curveball. And I think it's often a way of whether you believe in God or whether you just believe in life's doing it. I do absolutely believe in God, and that asking you how badly you really want something in life. How important is it to you, really?
So it'll be good when it gets out. It'll be very refined, and you'll have gone through the struggles to make it happen, which will probably make it pretty good. That seems like a good venture, especially considering the whole conversation that we've had in terms of your growth and your wisdom. I think that's where you'll have a lot to give in terms of your own message, so to speak.
If you write that book, I'll read it. So that sounds great.
Well, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. That means a lot. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. That's a non-starter. I mean, that's easy. Everybody, thanks for tuning in, listening. I'm really excited to have actually gotten a chance to talk to Paul because unlike most of our guests, I've actually never gotten to meet him yet. So, not in person anyway. So, go check out what he's doing, especially if this sort of stuff resonates with you. And again, he's writing tons of stuff on Teenage. He's always there. And while you're at it, go check out what I'm writing on there too. So, Paul, thanks, man, for being on here. We appreciate it. We're actually going to post this up right away. Usually we record these things in advance. This thing is going up within the next 10, 15 minutes.
I was traveling.
Yeah, you were traveling. You fucked up. So cool. All right, brother.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate it, guys. I had a good time. And clearly, we went on for almost more than an hour and a half. So I hope it was as good for you as it was for me.
It was amazing. Hang on for a second after we shut down. Cool.
Shut up and sit down.